Well,
This meeting is being recorded.
okay. All right.
So it's kind of not unlike the perils of small development, incremental development. I
Right.
reconnected with those people, by the way.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, I'm going to.
Hello, everyone. We will get started in just a moment. I see some folks are still coming into the room, but we'll get started in just a few moments.
I don't know how, this is kind of silly, but I don't know how, oh, I found it. I figured it out, how to share. Well, it would be great. We still have funding and options. So, it would be nice if we could reconnect with people and figure out what to do.
Yeah, and I forgot I presented for them. It was 2018 when they came to town. I think it's part of the CNU work or something, the local chapter.
Oh.
But they're still presenting all around. I was reaching out to them. I said, we would like to be able to talk about things we're doing in Louisville. They're pretty cool.
Oh, heck yeah.
And they said, sure. So I'll let you know when that turns into something.
Oh, that sounds awesome.
All right, I think we are ready to get started. We got a couple folks on in the room. Well, welcome back you all to the Purpose Driven Developer Academy. We are in week 5. We're about halfway through this 8-week course. Your facilitator for this evening, Ms. Tiffany Williams, is actually out due to a family emergency, but no fear, we actually have some great speakers here this evening to carry it on. I'm going to introduce them. We have Ms. Laura Grabowski with Develop Louisville, and also Dave Marshall. I'm sorry if I pronounced your last name wrong, but they are here representing Develop Louisville with Metro government. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Laura, and she will go into their presentation. So Laura.
That's great. Thanks. Thank you so much, Anisha. It's great to be here with everybody. It would be nice if it were in person, but I know we're getting there. We're moving back to that. So it's nice to have a virtual option too. So I'm going to pull up, let's see if I can share my screen. I'll pull up, we just put a few slides together. And what I really wanted to do was to talk a little bit, just start out by explaining a little bit about who we are and what we wanted to talk about tonight, where we fit in to the Purpose Driven Developers Academy. So as Janisha said, I'm Laura Grabowski, and I'm the director of the Office of Housing and Community Development. And that is one of the offices within the larger department of Develop Louisville. I'll turn it over to Dave in a minute to introduce himself and what Develop Louisville is. But in the meantime, the Office of Housing and Community Development handles a lot of different things, anything affordable housing. So we have funding available for affordable housing developers. We have home repair grants available for homeowners. We run the Lead Safe Louisville program, which provides grant funding and work for homeowners and landlords that have older houses where there's the potential for lead poisoning for children. We run a lot of eviction prevention right now, and that's new since the COVID pandemic. We didn't do that before, but we now have a ton of eviction prevention, rental assistance. And then the other side of our shop handles vacant and abandoned properties, and that's mostly what we're going to be talking about tonight. But you may or may not be familiar with the city foreclosure program, demolition program, and the land bank. But if you aren't, that's okay. We're going to, by the end of our presentation, hopefully you'll know at least a little bit more about it. So anyway, that's a little bit about who I am. Dave, if you don't mind to introduce yourself, and then we'll talk a little bit about what we're going to talk about tonight.
Sure. Good evening, good afternoon, everybody. Glad to be a part of this. As Laura said, this is an exciting opportunity. So thanks for inviting Laura and I to the session, and hopefully we provide you some great information you can use but also to help you connect with some folks there at Metro. If you have other questions or follow-up things, or you have specific projects, we're always here to help. Again, my name is Dave Marshall, and let's see, as Laura mentioned, there is the Office of Housing and Community Development, and that's part of a bigger group called Develop Louisville. Develop Louisville is an agency in Metro that really focuses on a broad range of real estate focused activities, including housing and community development, Laura's group, but also planning and zoning, also advanced planning and sustainability. So we're starting to see some interest and discussion about solar panels. So that's kind of in our shop too. We also have Brightside, which a lot of folks are familiar with. And then we are, and I like to say at arm's length or very near to the construction permitting, building permits. So we work closely with them in code enforcement. They're not in our direct group, but we work very closely with them. They're actually in the same building as Laura and I down at 444 South 5th Street. So that's kind of who I am, background, and kind of just some thoughts there. And we'll head into the presentation, I believe.
So I'm assuming that you all can hear us, and I'm hoping that you can see a blue slide that says today's topics.
Yes.
So if you, okay, great, perfect. It's a little bit different. I'm trying this on my laptop and I only have one screen, you know, that's a terrible burden. So anyway, we know that an important part of a real estate developer is the real estate. So we wanted to talk a little bit tonight about real estate acquisition, specifically related to the land bank, but also some other acquisition possibilities. We know that there is a lot of information out there and also misinformation about the city owning properties and the city selling properties and who they sell to and that sort of thing. So hopefully by the end of this evening, you'll have a better understanding of how that works and especially who to contact to get more information, because a lot of times that's an important part of any educational opportunity is to figure out who to go to. So we'll cover, you know, how you can find out about properties that are available and what's the process, what are we looking for, what makes a good proposal. That's all land bank related. And then we'll talk a little bit about the commissioner's sale, the Jefferson County Master Commissioner's sale, and also just some private acquisition, just some tips about that. After we're done with that, I'll turn it over to Dave and he'll talk about the city development process. It's pretty difficult, I think, to do any real estate development in the city without having to interact with the city in some way. I mean, whether you have to, you know, ask for something relating to zoning compliance, a zoning variance, or a zoning change, you'll definitely need, you know, a building permit, and you'll have to deal with inspectors and that sort of thing. So the city has done a decent amount over the last decade to make those processes a bit easier and more streamlined. I'm sure we have far to go, not a lot more room for improvement, but I think that understanding a little bit about the processes here will get you in the right direction. So if anybody, the other thing is I'm trying to figure out if people have questions. I'm not sure that I'm gonna know that that's happening. So
I'll be monitoring the chat for you, and then if they raise their hands, then we'll be able to see.
Perfect. Please just cut me off. Sometimes I get off on a tangent, but absolutely, it's probably easier to answer questions kind of in the middle than wait. But it's up to you all. So.
Gotcha.
So anyway, thank you. So we'll start with what is the land bank. The land bank. Whenever anybody's talking about city-owned properties, the city of Louisville or Metro government really owns very few properties that are available for purchase. Of course, we own a ton of properties that employees are in, and park lands and all of that. But a lot of times in communities, we hear, you know, city-owned property, and it's fine to say that, but just know that it's really the land bank that owns those properties. And it's kind of an interesting background. The land bank As you can see here, it was a partnership between the three main taxing entities, the city, or at the time, the city and the county, the state, and the school board. Those are when you pay property taxes, those are the main entities that those tax dollars go to. And they realized that there were plenty of properties that were vacant and abandoned and not tax producing. And so in the late 80s, where I think the oldest or the third oldest one in the whole country got together and created a statute that created a land bank, and followed up by ordinance. So that's been in place for about 30 years. The land bank owns about 500 properties. The picture on the right of the structure, which is actually a before picture, the next slide has an after, but most of those 500 properties are vacant lots. This is one big myth out there, that every time you see a boarded up house, the myth is that the city or the land bank owns it. We own at any given time, maybe 15 houses, maybe 20. So it's, those 15 and 20, we'll talk about them. They are definitely available for you to acquire. But most of the time, if you're coming to the land bank, you're looking for a vacant lot. How do we get these properties? In 2012, the city started a foreclosure program, and that is based on code enforcement liens mostly. I don't know, how much everybody knows about Kentucky real estate law. I certainly know more now than I used to, but we are a very strong property rights state, and I think most people would think that's a good thing. You can go on vacation and not, be worried that your property was going to be taken. But in the case of properties that have been vacant for a long time and are presumed to be abandoned, meaning the owner is not there, the owner might have passed away, with leaving no clear heirs, or the heirs don't know that they own the property now, or it was a corporation that is dissolved. That happens a lot. Each vacant property case is kind of different, but they all fit into one bucket or another. But anyway, when you have a state that really cares about its property rights, it makes it very difficult to take property even when it's abandoned. So every property, in order to dispose of a property, you need an owner, preferably the right owner, to sign a deed. And a lot of times with these properties, that can't happen. So we foreclose on around 150 properties a year. Those are all vacant and abandoned. If an owner comes forward or an heir comes forward during the case, yay, we're excited about that. But it's pretty rare that happens. And we also sometimes get calls from heirs, or sometimes banks or corporations that say they just want to donate the property. And we do maybe about 30 of those a year. So that's just the land bank in a nutshell. The mission is to put properties back into productive use. And productive partially means tax producing, but it also means, for a community benefit. The statute requires it for housing, new industry, and jobs. That's what the actual statute says. So we have all these properties. How would you, as a real estate developer, get your hands on them? We sell land bank properties through a variety of methods, a variety of sales programs. The land bank, as you now know, is a partnership. And so this isn't something, the approval of this doesn't happen at the city level. It is a board that meets monthly. There is a representative from the city, the state, and the school board on the land bank board. And generally what happens is applications come in. Metro has staff that reviews the applications, and then those applications are presented to the land bank board. That board gives the ultimate approval as to whether those properties are going to be sold or not. So there's no reason to be worried or to be intimidated. It's a pretty easy process, but it is important to note that this isn't something that the city has complete control over. So just to run through a few of these sales programs. Generally, when you're thinking about purchasing something from the land bank, if you're thinking about a vacant lot, which as you now know, that's most of our inventory, you're going to want to make sure that we own it. Don't assume that that just because it's a vacant lot, and even if the city's cutting it, that we own it, because there are plenty out there that we don't own. But if we do, there are a couple of different options. The real estate developers are going to want to focus on those last two bullets under vacant lot sales program: new construction budget rate, new construction flex rate, because my assumption is, as real estate developers, you're developing real estate, so you want to build something. The other two are mostly geared toward residents in the neighborhood. You know, if a lot of people have been mowing lawns on their block for years, that they would apply through the Cut It Keep It program. And then a lot of people own a house and there's a lot next door, and that's the side yard program. But you all want to focus on budget rate and flex rate. We'll go into a little bit of what we need to see, or what you need to submit with that application. But essentially the difference is in the name. Budget rate, you're going to get the best price that we have. Depending on the size of the lot, it's generally either $500 or $1,000 for the vacant lot. You're going to need to provide a plan of what you're going to do, you know, what you're going to build, a budget of how much it's going to cost. You're going to have to show proof of funds that you have the money to cover your budget, and a timeline. And that timeline will be included in the deed restrictions when when the property is transferred over. And we do monitor those. The flex rate is all exactly the same, except that the price is a little bit higher because we understand that sometimes entities, real estate developers, need the land in order to go raise the money. We've had a situation where a nonprofit wanted to build a headquarters, but they wanted to do a capital campaign, but they needed the land first. So they purchased property under flex rate. We've had people who want to use the land as some sort of collateral for a loan. They've used flex rate. So, I mean, it's still not, it's still not as expensive, I think, as land is on the private market, but it is based on the square footage. So those are your two options that you're going to go for on the sales programs if you're looking to build something, new construction, whether commercial or residential. I'll go on to the structure sales programs. I do want to note before I go on that all of this information, I've got a link to our website on a following slide. All of this is there. So don't feel like you have to, remember all of it. And we do have great team members who will more than happily answer your call and walk you through it. We do a lot of hand holding, especially with newer and smaller developers. So the vacant structure is essentially buildings, and most of the buildings that we have, our houses, are separated essentially by condition. So the request for proposals, none of these houses are in good condition. I'll just tell you that. I'm sure that that's not a surprise to anybody. None of these are in good condition, but the request for proposals are in good enough condition that someone could walk through. And at least before COVID, we would have open houses. You could come, bring your contractors. It would help people get a sense of A, whether they liked the house, and B, whether, what their potential budget could be. We're going to get back to that soon, but in the meantime, we've been having video tours. So those are the requests for proposals. Those houses, they are disposed of based on scoring criteria, and the scoring is on our website. But essentially, we're looking for somebody with the best proposal, not just the highest cost, the highest offer price. We want to see a good rehab budget. We would love for properties to go to an owner occupant. If not, we'd love for it to be sold instead of rented. There's just, there's different scoring criteria for different things. So when those open, we normally leave them open for a week, and you would submit your proposal along with other interested parties. They get scored, and then they would go, the one proposal that would be recommended would go to the next land bank meeting. for approval. That's a little bit different than our last look program. And that is essentially what it's called. It's last look. It means we got it. It's really probably is a demolition candidate, or it's got some structural issues. But what we found about 5 years ago is that we were demolishing properties, or we were slating properties for demolition that ended up, people wanted to save them. People were interested in them, either for, for whatever reason. So anyway, so now before we demolish any properties in the land bank, we put it through the last look program. And that means we put it out. We say, hey, first 30 days, do you want to save this structure? These are what everybody calls the dollar houses. So yes, they're a dollar, but you do have to show that you have the proof of funds in order to rehab, not the whole thing, but the exterior and the structural conditions within the first 6 months. That helps, helps the neighbors, helps the community, and ultimately it'll help you as the buyer. If not, if there's a lot that you're, if the parcel is in a location that you're interested in, and nobody picks up the house in the first 30 days, then the house is available through what we call demo for deed. And that's essentially, again, it's a dollar, but what we're looking for at that point is to save the city money on demolition. And so we're just looking for the buyer to cover the demolition costs on that. So those are the two ways to purchase properties out of the land bank. And the third option, which happens sporadically, is most of the properties, if you go to our website, and the link I think is on the next slide, you will see are smaller, they're residential, they're really infill lots. We don't often have multiple lots in a row, anything, corner commercial. We just don't get a lot of that higher value. But when we do, we put those out through what we call a solicitation of interest. And it's essentially open for 30 or 60 days. And we say, give us your proposal. What is it that you want to do? And we get a lot of different kinds of proposals. Sometimes we'll get, something from a church. They want to put, a church in a community center. Somebody else will want to build townhouses. Somebody else will want to put, some sort of community garden. It's all over the place. And then there's a selection committee that meets and scores. And again, we're looking at capacity and kind of the highest and best use for the neighborhood. I would like to go over this really quickly and then maybe pause for a sec and take any questions. I know this is a lot of information, but just generally, if you as a real estate developer are thinking of purchasing from the land bank, I think the thing to understand is that the properties that go into the land bank are properties that have been vacant and abandoned for a long time. They've been neighborhood problems for a long time. The city has put a lot of money into maintaining them generally for a long time. And so we are not interested in getting those properties back out to an entity that is of a high risk of it turning into another vacant and abandoned property. So we do have a few safeguards in there, and that's how the land bank is set up. So when you submit your application, we're going to look at every property that you own, either individually or in your company name. We're going to make sure that there are no code violations or citations, and that you're up to date on your property taxes. We have had people before, contact us and say, now that code citation, I just paid it, or, it was a mistake or something like that. And, we work with people. It's not an automatic, deny, we're never going to talk to you again, but that we're looking for buyers that have capacity. If you don't own anything else, that doesn't harm you in any way. But if, whatever you own, you want to make sure that there are no open code violations, there's no unpaid citations, and that you're up to date on your property taxes. We are almost always going to want to know the plans for the property. Now, obviously, if you're rehabbing a structure, that's a little bit different. We're going to want to see a budget rather than the actual plan. The plan is, rehab the property. But any new construction, we're going to want to see the plans, and we're looking for people and entities that have the capacity to follow through with what the plans are. Obviously, we talked about you're going to have to, try your best to attend the land bank meeting. The board members often have questions. And then, once the project is approved, and the property is transferred, we're not hands off. It will be monitored. You'll have 6 months, 12 months, 18 months to finish, and we'll be checking on you, partially to make sure that you're doing what you said you were going to do, but also partially to see if there's any help. I mean, we've had a lot of people, and Dave will talk about that a little bit later, but we've had tons of people get stuck in zoning or in permitting, and we're not magicians by any means, but a lot of times we can step in and try to smooth out the process and see what we can do. Most times when people get properties, we've had, I don't know, I think our success rate is, over 93%. We generally don't have a lot of issues because we do a lot of the review on the front end. Every once in a while, somebody will bite off way more than they can chew. And if so, there's no, where they say no harm, no foul, they give it back to us. It's not the end of the world. Every once in a while, somebody will walk away, and that essentially means the city has to go through another legal process to get it back. So we do try to keep in contact with the people purchasing from us so that we can see how things are going. With that, I'm going to take a drink of water and see if anybody has any questions. I know that was a lot. Nothing. All right. Okay, we talked about this a little bit, what makes a strong proposal?
Sorry, I did have a question. I just couldn't find my mute button.
Oh, okay, great, sorry.
Say if you put in for one of those type of properties, and if you don't get it, do you get any kind of reasons or identification why you didn't?
Yeah, yes, absolutely. Yes, you'll get, we're using a new system that is on our website, a new software system. It's called eProperty Plus. It's not that important, but the nice thing about it is that you will have an account. And so that's important. You have to make an account for yourself. It's, a username and password. And then when you want to apply, it keeps track of your applications. It's helpful for us because if there's an application in on something that is a vacant lot, it's first come, first serve, we can turn it to, we have an application. So it kind of stops a bunch of applications coming in when people think that properties are available, but you'll also get notifications by email, and you can log into the system and kind of see where the application is. But yeah, we have, 25 different reasons. A lot of times people are denied because it's first come, first serve, and we already had an application. On the request for proposals, it will be that someone scored higher than you. Sometimes applications are incomplete. I'm just trying to think of the frequent reasons that people are denied. But the other thing is, you can always call us. I mean, we're pretty short staffed right now, just like everybody else is, but leave us a message, we'll get back to you. And we're happy to kind of talk through applications too with people, just to say, hey, we didn't, this plan might not have been as strong as it could have been, or, the budget really wasn't there, whatever. Does that answer your question?
Yep.
Okay, perfect.
Laura,
Anybody else while we're here?
I was thinking in terms of your comment about not getting there first. I mean, you can sign up for email blasts, or do you encourage people to check back on the inventory regularly? Or
yeah, the best thing is here's our website here. If you go to this website, on the left, there's something called subscribe. The best thing to do, I promise we won't spam you all the time. We don't sell your your information. Put your email in. You can also put your phone number in, and you'll get a text. So when we have new properties available, the vacant lots come out maybe once a month, and structures are more sporadic, but at least, well, at this point, maybe once every couple of months. But you'll get a text or an email that there are new properties available. So you can go straight to the website. Make sure you all, just go home tonight or do it now. Go ahead and sign up for not only for the listserv, but sign up on that on our website so that you have an account you can log in, because then when something's available that you want, you can go ahead and start getting your application together. There will be, things you need to upload. You'll need, some information, but at least you'll already have your account there. So the email will come through. The text is shorter, but at least will alert you to the fact that there are new properties and you need to go, you need to go check it out. Does that help, Dave? Yes, good.
Yes. Yeah, then that's
Okay.
one of those things that you all have done in just the past few years of, again, just trying to get the word out and making people aware of these opportunities, which I think is a great
Right,
thing.
exactly. And I will share something with this group because I think it's important. I think it was, I'm trying to even remember when it was. I believe it was in the fall of 2020. We the land bank decided to undertake a racial equity review of our programs. The land bank has historically, we've tried to provide opportunities to everybody, but what we were noticing is that a lot of people who are purchasing from us were investors, and not that there's anything wrong with that. I mean, you all hopefully will be investors too, or are investors already, but we wanted to make sure that that our buyers all had a good chance. So anyway, a year and a half later, I believe at the end of next month, we will be recommending some changes to these programs that we're talking about tonight to the Land Bank Board, with the hopes that they'll incorporate them as part of the racial equity review. One of those things is we are taking a really close look at the first come first serve method that we've been incorporating in a lot of our programs. So you may see some of that change. In fact, we had a land bank meeting today, and someone stood up and said that they had trouble with the first come first serve because they could never, they were a contractor, so they were always working at 2 o'clock when the email went out, and they could never get there. So anyway, I don't expect a lot of drastic changes, but just know that you may see a few changes on that in the near future. So just before we kind of close up on property acquisition, and we start talking about city development processes, I just wanted to touch on other acquisition, because you all as real estate developers, most real estate developers don't just buy from the land bank. We have a lot of people who will get a property from the land bank, and then they'll get another property from a private owner. They might go to the commissioner's sale and get another property. I mean, people get properties where they can and with the least complicated. So if you're interested in other vacant properties, or if you want to buy something and you're not seeing it on the land bank's inventory, there are a couple options. One, I don't know how familiar you all are with it, but the Jefferson County Master Commissioner runs an auction every 2 weeks, and this is essentially the sale on the courthouse steps that people talk about. This is not on the courthouse steps. It's right now it's in the old jail, which is a little bit weird, but anyway, their website, which is right there, lists all of the properties on the upcoming sales. You will see the land bank there. When like we talked about, we initiate foreclosures on abandoned properties. We will go to the sale and we will bid on those properties that we've initiated. A lot of times, sometimes we'll get outbid, but generally we will try. But there are plenty of properties out there that the city doesn't have anything to do with. And you can look at the lists. They publish them, I don't know, a good 2 months in advance at least. These are purchased sight unseen. I mean, you can go drive by them. I would not recommend going in them, though I know some people do, but I will not be on record recommending that. That is not safe. But the one thing to do is, if you are interested in this, read their website in full and call them. They do require, there are a decent amount of what do I want to say? There's some red tape. You know, if you don't have cash, you have to get a bond, and the bond has to be approved before. And if you do have cash, you can only bring in a certain amount of cash. And if the price is over that, then you can't get it. It's not as complicated as I'm making it out to seem, but I'm doing that for a purpose because I want you all to know you've got to fully understand the auction process before you fall in love with the property and say, this is mine, I'm going to go get it. And then you get there and they're like, nope, it won't work because of X reason. So, you know, feel free to go a few times, but definitely, you know, review their website and give them a call. We have on our Facebook page, Develop Louisville's Facebook page, we have a series of lunch and learns. We were doing these hour-long kind of educational pieces, especially during the pandemic. And I think I sent the presentation from this one on property research to Janisha. So if not, I can send it out. But go watch this one on property research. There are a ton of resources at your fingertips with you and a computer that you can figure out. And if you're looking at X property on whatever street and you want to know what's going on with it, I mean, you're welcome to call us and we can look it up, but there are a lot of things that you can do yourself to try to figure out, you know, what the ownership is, what the liens are, what the back taxes are, and all of that is important when you go to purchase properties. You need to know what is going on with that property. I cannot tell you how many times we see even very experienced developers purchase properties and they have code enforcement liens attached to them or sold tax liens, and those transfer with the property. So now the new owner who was super excited about you know, rehabbing this property, and they, you know, maybe they had a budget that didn't include paying off these liens, ends up in a world of hurt. So make sure you know what you're getting into before you're purchasing. That is less important at the commissioner's sale because the foreclosure should, most of the time does, wipe all of that out. Same thing with land bank. You're getting a clean title. But there are tons of vacant properties out there that are privately owned. And so we don't consider those abandoned because there is an owner somewhere who can sign over the deed. But just please make sure you understand what's going on with the title before you buy. I will mention this really quickly, but there is a way for people to request that code enforcement liens be reduced or waived. I'm not talking about taxes, I'm talking about code enforcement liens. And it goes through our Office of Management and Budget. So please understand that their job is to collect revenue for the city. So they're not super inclined to waive or reduce liens, but it can be done. There is an application. So if you find yourself in that scenario where you're trying to negotiate with a seller and you really want this property and you notice that there are code enforcement liens, you know, at least give them a call and try to work through that with them before the property gets transferred. So that was a lot. I felt like I was a little bit on the soapbox there at the end, but before I turn it over to Dave, does anybody have any final questions about property acquisition, purchases, land bank, anything like that?
Hello. What would you consider I apply under? There is a home. I own a home on the street and it's 2 doors down. So would that be a side lot purchase or?
Is it a vacant lot or is it a building?
Vacant lot.
It is a lot. Okay. It could be what they call cut it, keep it. Side yard is only right next door. So if it's two
Okay.
away, it will be cut it, keep it. Just make sure that we own it before you put in an application for it. But yeah, that's what.
Yeah, she shows on your website.
Perfect. Yeah, perfect. Yeah, we started cut it, keep it. It was also about 5 years ago. We had so many people, so many neighbors calling us and saying, you know, I've been mowing this yard down the street for me for 10 years, but there really wasn't a way for them to purchase it because it wasn't a side yard and they don't want to build on it. So cut it, keep it. It's $500. Essentially, there's a deed restriction put on there for 3 years, not to sell it. But, if you build and sell on it, you just come back to the land bank. It's not, and ask for that to be released. It's really not that big of a deal. But yeah, that's what that is. Cut it, keep it.
Thank you.
But to
Yeah.
keep it, is that, you said that, does it have to be on your block?
It does. It has to be
Okay.
on your block. Yeah. You have to
Okay.
own and occupy something on your block. Yeah.
Okay. I do have another question.
Sure.
So when we were talking about save the structure or proposal, there was one that you mentioned that there were certain criteria that that basically point system that you
Yes.
choose from. As far as, I think one of them was whether you're going to occupy, rent, or sell.
Uh-huh.
With one like that, what type of guarantee or what takes place after to make sure people are following those stipulations?
Yeah, that's a good question. At this point, we generally monitor through the end of the project, and then we will release the restrictions. If we don't get a lot of owner occupants, but we do get some, and so we will do everything that we can to make sure that the utilities are in your name and that essentially you've moved in. Now, I mean, if you move out 3 months later, I mean, there's not really a lot that can be done at that point. But we do want to see that people are being as truthful as possible, because to your point, I mean, they do get extra points for that. And we have had a situation, well, two, at least in the past 5 years, that someone said they were going to own and occupy it, and it turned out to be a more of a rental. It was kind of complicated, but we ended up working that out with the buyer. So anyway, I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, and the second one for save the structure, that one does not have it. It's just first come, first serve, with as long as there's certain financial criteria and codes and things are met.
That's
or no,
right.
not having codes. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Right. Yeah. And actually, I mean, that's one of the things that we've been looking at through this racial equity review. We were noticing that, people, the same group of people.
Yes, I was about to say that. I was
Yeah.
about to ask you. That was my next part. Okay.
Yeah. And I'll say the land bank board really doesn't like to sell multiple properties to the same person at the same time. They want to see progress and then come back. So we had heard some concerns from them, and then just frankly from an equity standpoint, if we send them out at 2:00 and we already have 3 applications by 2:03, there's there's obviously somebody that has time and knows what's going on can get to it before other people do. So we're looking to recommend that all of our structure programs go through some sort of scoring to kind of even the playing field a bit.
Okay. Makes sense. As I tell you what, I actually somebody that applied for one of the 2 recent properties came up last month.
Oh,
And
boy.
I'm signed up for the notifications. So by the time I got the notification, next day I followed up with my bank, had a
No,
letter in. It was
too
already,
late.
it was 2 gone. I was
Yeah.
like, wow, okay. And
No, I mean, I don't mean to laugh about it, because I mean, really, it has become, I mean, not necessarily a problem, but yeah, I don't think that we should be running a program where, if you know how to play the game really well, you win. That's not
right.
the kind of program that we want to run, and that's not the program that's best for the community and the neighborhood. So, it was done that way because those properties, the last look properties, are in such bad shape. We didn't want to take time, but our RFP properties are only out for 7 days now. So I don't think 7 days is going to mean the difference between the house falling down and not. So anyway, we'll be making some changes to that, but absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Anybody else? No. Okay. All right. Let me stop sharing for a second there. Let me share again so that, gosh, just press the button. Here we go.
We're just really anxious to hear about codes, Laura.
I know, right? Okay, here we go. All right, so I'll turn it over to Dave here to talk a bit about the city development process.
Sure, thank you. And yeah, I was making notes while Laura was presenting and you all were having some conversation. But again, I think we've had some people join us since the beginning, but my name's Dave Marshall and I work with Develop Louisville, which is an agency that deals with a variety of real estate development functions in Metro. And we work very closely with the construction permitting teams. And so basically I've been with Metro for 18 years and work with people really on a daily basis, as Laura and her team do, with people on their projects. And our goal is to help people be successful and, you know, build a strong community for everybody. So that's our goal. And so any way that we can be doing that, and while complying with those kind of regulations that Laura and I deal with on a daily basis, you know, responsible code work, that's kind of the thing. So what I always sort of preach, I work with people at all levels of development, is while you're doing your research and trying to pick your project, as Laura mentioned, you know, you're looking at specific areas you want to work in. And that's one thing I've heard people do. They say, you know, I kind of have the neighborhoods that I really want to focus on. And you learn those backwards and forwards, and you're driving them regularly and learning, you know, which properties are owned by who, and watching the market, because as you all know and kind of came up, it happens real fast these days, especially, you know, desirable properties. They happen fast and they'll come on the market. Sometimes you don't even see the sign. For those of you who maybe don't have the real estate license, maybe that's somebody on your team or somebody that's close at hand, that is a resource for you to monitor things. I was looking at some properties for a while myself, and I had a real estate friend, and she could plug it in, you know, in this zip code, things that pop up between this range, you know, I'd get a report. So they can do that, and especially if you have a real good partnership with folks. That's another thing I've learned, is that relationships really matter. So relationships with us, relationships with your banker, relationships with your, you know, your real estate folks, whatever those skill sets that complement your skill sets, that's a good thing to think about. And the same applies to zoning and permitting. So we have some tools. Probably the biggest one we have is our Logic, LOJIC.org. And you can look up properties and look up all this kind of stuff. And if we get to it, maybe we can even do a sample. But planning the project, if you've got a property you're interested in, let's start there. Maybe it's on Laura's list, or maybe it's something that's on the market, or something you've got your eye on. Go ahead and start checking the zoning and floodplain status. You know, is it in a floodplain? That's a big flag. You know, that's one of those ones that's really hard to overcome. You have to build a property up so high up out of the ground. That's going to be more expense. And that's kind of the underlying thing of this, knowing what to know and when affects the bottom line of the project and whether or not it's going to cash flow for you. So do the homework first. And I'll start off with residential sort of versus commercial. Like 1 and 2 family residential are the easiest code in terms of codes. Those are the simplest ones. Within the range of those, the simplest ones are the ones that are in pretty good shape. Maybe they just need a coat of paint or something, and you don't need a building permit or zoning, or you don't really need to go through us at all. Again, those are the ones that are a little more competitive to get. But as you build up your skill set and your resume on these things and your confidence, maybe you can take on that house that needs, maybe it needs all new windows and doors. Maybe it needs paint or a roof. You start learning how much those kind of things cost. Usually a roof, you kind of get a real sense of the costs these days are going up and down like crazy, mostly up. Supplies of materials really extending out. So the market on building materials and price, again, something to factor in, but sort of minimizing your costs in terms of finding things that are easier to do. That's a good starting point. So what I say is, and I'll get to my little graphic here, planning your project. I always check the zoning. When somebody calls me and says, hey, what's going on with this property? I'll say, is it residential? So if somebody says, hey, I want to do a coffee shop on this property, if it's zoned residential, you really can't unless you go through a rezoning process. Another thing about zoning is density, number of units per acre. So it's R5, R6, R7. Those are things that are the zoning code that tell you how many units you could put on a piece of property. So if you get a piece of property and you say, I want to put 3 units on it, zoning might not allow you to do that. So that's kind of a big one. Know the zoning, floodplain, building. Again, as Laura said, some of the ones on that, on the last look, those are going to need new framing or some remedial work of rebuilding some roof rafters, or maybe water has gotten in there and you've got some mold and you've got floor areas that are failing. If you've got a good carpenter or framer on your team, that helps a lot, or you've got a partnership with somebody that does that work, that's huge. So if you're going into last look, you really probably should have a contractor with you that you have a good partnership with, unless you have those skills yourself. As you get into things like commercial jobs, that's when you start talking about architects. You don't really need an architect for 1 and 2 family homes. So again, the complexity, cost, as those things build up. We also have some properties in Louisville that are in preservation districts like Old Louisville or Cherokee Triangle. Something to be familiar with. Another state roads, this is interesting. We had one on Laura's list, an SOI property, solicitation of interest. It was a great commercial corner piece, but it was on a state road. It was at the intersection of a state road and a one-way road. And this guy was trying to get a curb cut so he could do go drive around the building, get a cup of coffee. He finally did it. He was super, super persistent. And we did what we could. It ultimately ended up being in the hands of our public works department, but he got it done. So that's going to be a great project. Sort of my next box, zoning review. So the first one is knowing the property. Next one is zoning review. So not only is zoning kind of about what you can do on a property, how many units you can build on a property, it's also about where the building, if you're building new or putting an addition on a building, where it can occur. There's side yard setbacks, there's private yard requirements, things like that. So some of those require variances when we work with Laura's team on, if somebody's looking at a property, we try to sort of suss that out as best we can. Hey, you're going to have some setbacks on this one, or you can only get so close to this property line, or you can't really do 3 units on that property. The zoning's not right. Now we try to figure that out in advance. We also have, and I'll give you a phone number here, our planning and design customer service. That's our zoning office, 574-6230. That's 574-6230. Laura and I can work with Janisha to get you any follow-up information or a copy of this presentation, our contact info. But they're a real good resource. other agency reviews and going on through. So, you kind of going left to right in the process. You're planning it, you're checking the zoning, you're seeing what other agencies might be involved, like MSD or utilities. Then kind of the last step is your building permits. That's what you're trying to get to. If your project needs a permit, if you're taking out a wall or building a wall, you need a permit. So that's kind of the dividing line. If you're running new electric, that's an electrical permit. You should have a electrical contractor. For a building permit, a property owner or a licensed contractor can pull that permit. So, and if it's on a house, it can be pretty simple drawings. Stuff on a piece of grid paper usually can suffice on a floor plan or elevations. So you don't need architects for those level of drawings. The building code, it's a state building code, but it's administered locally. So it's, but on existing buildings, we have some flexibility on some building code things. So everybody tries to do the best they can to make sure that what you're ending up with is a fundamentally safe building. Once you get the permit, you're then, cut loose to start doing your construction. Probably count on 4 to 6 weeks for a building permit. So knowing your time lengths is one thing. And then after you do the work, you need to get it inspected. And that's after the end of that, then you end up with your certificate of occupancy. Again, if you're like, common projects I've seen are people like opening up, maybe it's a shotgun or maybe it's a, other kind of standard kind of house type, a ranch, kind of one story. People tend to open up the kitchen to the dining room or the dining room to the family room, or they finish out the basement, or maybe they put a dormer on the top so they can have a living space upstairs. Those are pretty common projects, but doable and pretty simply usually. I've also get a lot of questions about tiny homes. Those are big. Well, it's kind of ironic to say, I suppose, but I always say, not all tiny homes are the same. Some people, when they say tiny home, they mean just a house that's built really small. Some people mean a shipping container. Some people mean a structure on wheels that's portable. Or some people mean something, hey, you just buy it pretty much prefab and you set it on the site. Each one of those kind of has nuances. If you're not done them before, I'd say shipping containers are pretty challenging. They sound kind of cool, but they have some unique things about them. I think next slide, Laura. So this, depending on how you can see it, well, I kind of see the bottom cut off.
Wait a minute, hold on. Is the last thing codes? Hold on, press the button, Laura. Codes and regs?
Yes.
Okay, and you can't see that?
I can now.
You can, okay, got it, okay. I was trying to see if I could make this like full screen. Well, you talk, I'll see. It might happen.
Okay. So I came up with this chart. And okay.
Sorry. I know, I'm sorry.
I think it's Control L.
Oh, thank you.
I think.
Okay, thank you.
Let's
see, thank you.
It takes a village, right? Thank you, Will. So kind of why I came up with this chart is if your project has this, you need to do that. So across and planning, the ones in orange, almost every project needs that. Unless you're just like, unless it's a go in there and clean it and paint it and sell it kind of deal. If you're doing some work, so down the left, column are the agencies. So we got a lot. And so that's why we're trying to, emphasize knowing what's coming at you in advance, working ahead and learning who you work with and where. And then across the, moving left to right are the actions. So for example, if you are doing zoning and land use, if that's all your project really needs, that's planning and design, that's construction review, that's in and around develop Louisville. If you're doing demolition, you're probably going to have to check in with MSD, maybe the fire department. If you're in a preservation district, that's talking to landmarks. Landmarks is in planning and design. If you're creating a small, either if you're building a new house or maybe a commercial structure, you're going to have a parking requirement. Excuse me. And it's MSD. It might be transportation if you need a curb cut. Okay, there we are. Preservation districts overlay. That's where I spend a lot of my time. If you're getting money from the city, that's, let's see, we have some economic development. MSD has used to have green infrastructure money. If you're doing a project where there's a vacant lot and you need to do some new connections like sewer and utility, that's a host of agencies you're going to have to work with. And again, we will send this to you, I believe. And if you have questions about how to contact any of these folks, let us know. And I think I maybe have just one, is the last slide kind of our contact info, Laura?
It is, yes.
Okay, so I might just sort of toll it back to maybe the previous slide. I'll open it up for questions. I know I threw a lot at you as well, and probably kind of fast. Let's see, I had made some notes again, starting, depending on where you are, but starting simple, things that don't require that much work. They may cost more, but the things like the last looks, if you got a strong background in construction, or you've got a partner, a contractor who can work with you to go in there and tackle those are pretty daunting sometimes, but and then moving up into commercial and multifamily. Multifamily is usually 3 units or more. Those are kind of higher level, kind of more challenging projects. But I'll kind of stop there and see if there's any questions that I can help folks with. You guys are like, oh my God, I'll never.
Nah, I was waiting just to make sure anybody else before I start asking questions.
Sure, maybe that'll help folks think of things.
All right. So first one, when you mentioned about kind of building on a property. So
Yes.
Residential, just your basic residential. I think is that residential 5? Is that R5 or R1? I'm not sure.
Well, the higher the number, and our whatever number is a zoning classification. So R5, you can have more units than say an R4. So the higher number,
Okay.
the more. It goes up to R7. I think we have even R8, but that's just, there's very, very little of that. Most of the county, and Laura mentioned our equity lens, most 85-90% of the county is R4 residential, which says you can only have 1 unit per, I think it's 1/4 acre.
Okay, and that
half
is
an
that,
acre, yeah.
and that 1 unit can be the duplex or?
Once you have a duplex, that's 2 units. So that's
Okay,
R5,
so,
R5B or
yeah.
R6.
Okay. You mentioned in shipping containers. Is there anything that's been, I guess, added to this, I guess, state building code book that that would help guide somebody if we're interested in going that route? Because kind of some from our previous calls, it was kind of mentioned that since it's new, that's one of the things when we're kind of late to the game in Kentucky, kind of doing those type of the shipping containers. We may not have everything outlined just yet for the type of building and development. So I was just kind of curious, has there been any plans or any updates that we can research to find out what we would need to do for
Yeah,
the city of Louisville?
There's actually, I'll put it in the chat. I'm sorry, Dave, I might be answering a question that you were going to answer, but there is codes and regs put together a guide to things like shipping containers, tiny homes, whatever. I don't know how helpful it is, but it's at least there. Sorry, Dave. I shouldn't have answered that
No,
question.
actually, I created that.
Oh,
years
sorry.
ago.
Dave created this really helpful thing.
to exactly to that point. Well, people were saying, what do we do? How do we do it? The ICC, which creates the building code, had created a standard that we could use as building officials for modifications to a standard shipping container. It's not super helpful, but it basically what we have had to rely on. And there's a shipping container project in Nulu on East Main Street.
Oh, okay.
And so that one was really cool. We when it comes to those, again, what I tell people is it's sort of a house-sized box. It's a shipping box. So you've got to now make this, so it kind of has the box of a house, but then you've got to do all the things that make it a house. You've got to cut in windows and doors, and run electric and plumbing. So we rely heavily on an architect or engineer's stamp, especially for the foundations.
Foundation, yeah.
Right.
But also the structural integrity, that as you cut holes into this metal box, it can handle less weight. So we really kind of rely on the expertise of an architect or engineer when it comes to those.
All right. So if you had like a pre-approved architectural plan from an architect that you purchased from a company, you could potentially use that?
Potentially, we would look to see if that architect is from Kentucky or engineer. So if it's a locally produced set of drawings, somebody that we're confident knows the Kentucky building code, we put a lot of faith in that. If it's something you bought online and the person is stamped in Colorado, we really kind of have to look pretty close at that. Just making up states could be.
Yeah, well, what I actually kind of researched and was looking at was, I think, what they do in the Netherlands. There's a lot of this they've been doing for years. So they have they kind of have their way of doing things over there. So I was kind of in some of my research. I just kind of been looking at that, and I have seen some local, companies probably like out of Colorado that actually are selling plans.
Well,
okay.
We worked on one that was a city funded project on South 18th and Magazine. It's called Opportunity Corner. If you've been about a block south of Broadway. Yeah. And I mean, it's a really cool one. It has 3 shipping containers, but one is up on its edge. And it took a long time to get through the process, but truly the issue was 2 things. One, they needed a foundation. And I think that wasn't contemplated. And 2, those drawings had to be stamped by an engineer architect. So I feel fairly certain, working with construction review, that if you go in with those expectations, I don't think that that permitting or that approval is any more difficult than anything else.
Okay.
If you've got that, and going in, that'll smooth your permitting process. If you go in and you got drawings or just a picture of the box, you're going to be there for a while. So
that was our situation. Yeah.
But those guys on East Main, they had their stuff down. They had the permitting was pretty simple, really, once they got into it.
Okay. I'm not sure if anybody else has any chat questions, but I got one more, but I'll see if anybody else has anything else first.
I'm not seeing any.
No, all right. So my last one is one of the newest ones is the ADUs. The
Yes.
auxiliary dwelling units. Yes. So we were talking about that a couple of weeks ago also, and I know that's fairly new. And one of the questions I had about it is that just kind of reading about it, because of course, we were all developers / possibly investors on this call, is that it mentioned that you must be owner occupant and you must live on their property. So you can't basically have, like if I had a rental property and I wanted to put an ADU in the back, I would not be allowed to do that because it's a rental property. It's not somewhere that I'm actually living. Any ideas of if any of that could possibly change? And what if I did have an ADU and a property that I own, but I was moving, but I didn't want to sell my property? So
well, I know that, I mean, that had just come up. In fact, I don't know if I remember when that was passed, but that was definitely something that Metro Council was interested in seeing, as having the person have their primary residence there when they're including the ADU. So I think it's way too new to think about amending, but
well, my thinking for it, only reason not just for investment properties, but kind of thinking about like some friends that I've talked to in some other cities, that because there's such a housing shortage, I mean, I'm hearing 4 million, 5 million, that, I mean, I think that's potential opportunity for a lot of people to at least help with somebody getting a start. Yeah. So
believe me, we agree. This was not something that we were necessarily in favor of. And I know that it was argued for a while, but I don't know that I had heard the final decision on it.
Yeah, and there are still, places, again, my code guy answer is always kind of, it depends. I mean, there's still on the books, different zones where you can do, and we can research this and give you a more complete answer, where you can do accessory apartments. And, and if your lot is R5B, you're allowed 2 units. And so ADUs are accessory dwelling units. The big discussion there is trying to expand where they can occur. Again, as like Laura said, we're for it. We need more housing. We need more opportunities. We need more choices. The pushback, but there's political pushback. People say, I don't know who's going to be living there. And if the owner's not there, who's going to keep track of what's happening, next door? So that's kind of the push and the pull on ADUs expanding where they can occur. But on the books currently, and also in a lot of our more urban areas, be it West Louisville, Old Louisville, Cherokee, we still have a lot of accessory apartments going in. And if you're doing short-term rental, that kind of is another twist. But I think we can get you a better, more complete answer on the status of that. But the expansion of where they can occur, that's the debate that's happening now.
Okay. All right. I appreciate it. That's all I have for now.
Oh, good questions. Good questions. Anybody else have anything? Hopefully we haven't scared you off, or
I know. I'm going to put our contact info in the chat. I believe you will be receiving or have already received a copy of our presentation, and this is on the back. This is on the last slide, but rather than bring it up right now, I'll just put it in the chat, and then please feel free to give us a call, Dave. And I don't know everything, but we generally know. I'm trying to see if I spelled Louisville wrong, and I did in mine. Sorry about that. I shouldn't type and talk at the same time.
And it might be, just as if you become interested in a property or you see one on Laura's list, just having a couple of those conversations, you kind of will get a feel for this. As we walk through a couple of scenarios, if you do care to reach out, email or call, after you do it a couple times, even just doing some exploration on a couple properties, I think you'll start to get a feel for it. I'm sure this is all kind of overwhelming if you haven't seen this kind of stuff before.
Right. And definitely make sure to check out the Develop Louisville Facebook page. I know that's weird to, try to push social media, but we did, I don't know, 10 or 15 of those lunch and learns. And they had, there was one that had smaller developers who had purchased from the land bank, and they were talking about their experiences, rehabbing, lessons learned. I thought that one was really good. The property research one is always popular. And there is how to buy a land bank property that's much more in depth than I went through. And there's down payment assistance and eviction prevention. There's a ton. So just check those out on the Facebook page. Anything else for us?
I'd kind of like to, encourage you all to continue to learn. I think this is a great program. I'm really excited that you invited us along, and we wish you all the best. And we at City will do what we can to help you be successful.
I do have one more. Why not? Since you guys are still here, you guys are you part of the process for Airbnb's approvals, or is that?
Yeah, that's in planning and design.
Okay.
Short-term rental.
Yes. Yeah. So,
sorry.
It's I know you can file for an appeal. So I have a situation. There's a piece of land that the city doesn't own yet, but may get it eventually. Unfortunately, it's very close, within the 600 feet of a property that is Airbnb. That particular property, what my idea was to build an accessible Airbnb. But the unfortunate thing is that somebody else already has one there. So I'm not sure if the appeals process will take in consideration something like that, or will it just be, nope, you're within 600 feet of another one, no go?
That's a good question. So you go to, so have you already gone for like a CUP on that?
No, I haven't done anything. I don't even own the property or anything yet, but it's something.
I would suggest talking. We can put you in contact with somebody at Planning and Design that deals with this every day. And
okay,
I think they're pretty good about walking people through processes, but also saying like, yeah, that, that could work. No, that's probably not going to work. That, they're not, they can't make decisions for you, but they can at least tell you how, probable something like that would be. I don't know, Dave. I don't.
Yeah,
I think if you know the answer, but I really don't.
The Planning Design customer service is always a good place to go, and they can.
Okay.
That's the 574-6230. But the distances change depending on the zoning and form district. But and they can tell you also, that kind of usually gets approved, or no, that never gets approved. Okay. The other guy that really knows the most about that, he's in planning and design. His name's Joe Haberman. Mm-hmm. And so if you can get a hold of him, he's kind of the guru on those. Oh yeah, Lars wrote.
Hold on, I'm gonna find his email address really quickly.
I don't know if he's Joe or Joseph.
No, I don't either.
He's also Joseph. Really smart on ADUs.
Oh.
Look to me. Okay, there's his email address in the chat.
Okay, thank you. I'm done this time, I promise.
Call us anytime. Anybody else have anything? If not, oh, Facebook page. Okay, hold on.
Like to say, if you don't, can't think of anything at the moment, or maybe as you go into another class or think of another project, just be sure to reach out, and just we'd be glad to help you out as we can. So.
Thank you again for having us. We look forward to hearing from you and seeing all the awesome things that you all do with this information. Not just our information, but the whole academy.
All right, thanks, Dave. I just want to let you all know that we will be sending this out, the information that Laura and Dave presented on in the email, so you all will receive it, and then it also will be in the Google Drive for the class. Again, thank you all for joining. We will give you all some time back to your day. Please, if you have questions between now and next class, make sure that you save them. Maybe if something that wasn't covered today, we will cover it on Wednesday when Tiffany will be joining us back. But again, if you all have any other questions, please reach out to Laura and Dave for any of your questions. And again, thank you all for joining us this evening.
Thank you. Have a great night.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.